Hi and welcome to a new tutorial. In this one we're going to be showing how you can deploy your Django project using DigitalOcean. Now DigitalOcean provides cloud services that help you to deploy applications, and so we're going to take a look at how to deploy our Django blog application that we've been working with in the past couple of weeks. And if you'd like to clone that repository, which we'll be working with, then you can just go to the Dream blog repository on our Just Django GitHub account. And so here is the latest version of the code. You can just clone or download this, and we'll be working with this project, which we'll be taking live. Now, DigitalOcean is the service that we'll be using in this video, and all you need to do is create yourself an account, which you can do so for free here at digitalocean.com. Now, I already have my account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in, and we'll walk through the procedure from then. Okay, so now I'm logged into my account, and what we're going to do is go ahead and create ourselves a droplet. So you can just click on droplets here in the left side panel, and basically a droplet is like a server instance. It's what we're going to use to actually hold our code in it and deploy it there. So we can just click create droplet. Now we're going to be using Ubuntu version 18 as the operating system to deploy on, and then the plan, we're just going to click standard, and then we can just go to the cheapest pricing plan, which is $5 per month. So I'm just going to select that, and then we can scroll down here. We're not going to add any backups or block storage. We're not going to add any SSH keys, and I'm also not going to choose a host name here. We'll just leave it as the default, and then just click create. Okay, so now my droplet has been created, and you can see them here. They're being listed out, and it gives you an IP address there that you can see. Now this IP address is important because it's what you're going to use to SSH into this server instance. And once you've created your droplet, you're going to receive an email from DigitalOcean, and in that email you're going to be provided with the root user password, which is what you're going to use to SSH into the root user. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All we're going to do is just open up our terminal here inside VS Code. And at this point, you're going to want to go and get the password from your email so that you can use it to log in over here. So we'll just say SSH and then root at the IP address of your droplet. Then we'll say yes to connect. And then here you're going to want to paste the password that you have from your email. You're not going to see it here, so we'll just paste it, click enter. And now it says we are changing the password for the root. So the current Nginx password, again, we'll paste that in. And now we can enter a new Nginx password, which I'll write and write again. And there we go. So now it has a new password. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to refer to an article which is posted on DigitalOcean's website. And in this article, it basically runs through setting up Django using Postgres and Ubuntu. So we'll just come over here and we will Google DigitalOcean Django Ubuntu Postgres tutorial. And here it is, how to set up Django with Postgres, Nginx, and G-Unicorn. This is the one that we want. And we're going to stick with the version of the tutorial being 16.04, but it won't make a difference. So the first thing it says we need to do is create a user that has sudo privileges. So we're just going to click this initial server setup guide, and we'll run through that quickly. And so we can just scroll down here, and we've already SSH'd into our instance. And then we can come here and copy this add user where Sammy is the username. And basically the reason for this is so that we aren't working out of the root user. So we'll just say add user, and in my case this will be Matt, and then I will add a password for this user, and I'll just leave it default for all of this information, and we'll say yes, it's correct. There we go. So now that user is created, and now we need to give it root privileges. So we'll just copy that line there, come back here and change this to Matt. There we go. And then the rest of this is just setting up public key authentication, which I'm not going to run through. You can run through this in your own time. So we can just go and close that tab. And now we can go ahead and install all the packages. We're going to do this for version 3 of Python. So we'll come here and we'll just go and copy the next line as well. And you can see in that line, it's installing Python 3 and it's installing these dev dependencies for Postgres. You can see PostgreSQL and PostgreSQL contrib, and as well as Nginx. And we'll just wait for that to finish installing. Cool, so that's finished installing. Now it says we can come here and create the PostgreSQL database and user. So we're going to use this command to change into the Postgres user. And now you can see we're in Postgres. And now we're going to create a database for the project. And this is something that you're going to want to write down. So we're going to go ahead and execute all these commands, creating a database with a specific project name, creating a user with the project user and a specific password, and then just following these 3 lines, and actually this last line as well. So we're going to run through all those lines quickly. Okay, so there you can see all of our commands. We created a database with blogdb as the name. We then created the user blog admin with the password of testing123, and then altered the roles according to what they've got in the tutorial, and then granted all privileges on that blogdb to the blog admin. And those are all the Postgres commands we needed to run. So now we can just type /q to quit out of Postgres, and there we go. Now we can go ahead and create a Python virtual environment, which we've seen many times before. So we're in Python 3, so we're going to install that. Cool, that's installed. Let's come back here, and now it says we're going to move into a directory where we will keep all of our project files. And we're going to do this from our mat user. So what I'm going to do is say su, which is switch user, and then mat. And now you can see that I'm logged into this user, and we'll just clear all of that. And if I change into a certain directory, let's actually follow it here. We'll say make directory, and then it's the tilde sign there, which references the home directory of the user. We'll just call this directory blog. So now if I go and list out /, you can see that we have home as a directory, and I will list out home, and there you can see is mat. So we'll list out home mat, which is the user, and there you can see blog. So this tilde sign is just referencing the home directory, or rather the logged in users directory inside home. So home/mat, because mat is the logged in user, and inside there is where we created blog. So now we can change into that. So we'll say change into, and then we'll put the tilde sign and then say blog. And if we list everything out, then there's nothing in it, of course. So let's clear that. And now we're going to create the virtual environment. So we'll just say virtual env, and I'll just say env is the name. There we go. And then we're going to activate it. So we'll say source env bin activate. Now it's activated. And if we come down, now we're installing the dependencies, which are Django, gunicorn, and scicop g2. However, at this point, what we're going to want to do is actually clone our working directory, and inside there we're going to have the dependencies, which will be Django, and we'll add gunicorn and scicop g2. So instead, actually in here, we'll just make sure that we put this into our requirements. So let's open up another terminal, and here we can then activate our virtual env, change into source, and we'll then say pip install gunicorn and scicop g2, but now the latest version is -binary. So this is quite important. So we'll just run those installations. And now we can say pip freeze into the requirements.txt. And there we go. Now you can see gunicorn is there and scicop g2. And I'm going to go and commit this to the repository. So we'll just say added production dependencies. And we'll just commit that and then push this to the repository. There we go. So now those requirements are in the requirements file. And this also ensures that when we pull the repository on the server, that we actually get all of the files with the latest version. And what we can do is we can just say git remote -v, and this shows the link to the repository. So this is what we're going to use to actually pull this on our server. So we'll come back here into the SSH, and what I'm going to do is say git init, and now it's initialized the repository, and we'll say git remote add origin, and then paste that there, and then we'll say git pull origin master. There we go. Now we can list this out, and all of the contents from our repository are now here inside our server blog project. Now what we needed to do was we needed to install those dependencies, and we have the virtual environment activated, so we can say pip install -r requirements.txt, and that's going to install everything for us, including gunicorn and scicop g2. And so if we look at the steps now, it's creating and configuring a new Django project, and we've seen this before. It says start a project, and then we adjust the project settings, and here we put the server IP address, or we put the domain name. Now we don't have a domain, so we're going to put the IP address, which we can just go back here and we'll copy that. And now the workflow is basically going to be that we're going to work here on our local project, commit the changes, and then pull that to the server. So let's go back here, go to blog settings, and we'll go to allowed hosts and paste the IP address right there. Then we can go and commit this and say added IP address, and then commit that there. And what instead I'm going to do is actually just split screen it, and we'll get rid of that bash there, and we'll say git push origin master. Now I know that some of these steps you're not going to be able to follow because you don't have write permissions to this repository, but it's more the principle of seeing how we go about moving this over from development to production. And so if you have your own project that you're working with in your own repository, then you can at least follow along with the same steps. So again, we'll say git pull origin master, and there we go. You see that one file change, which is just adding the IP address. And now let's go back to the tutorial. So we've added the IP address in there, and now it's changing the settings with your PostgreSQL database. So we're going to copy that, and we'll come back here. We'll go back to the settings, and I'm just going to drag this down. Now here we have a database setup which is for SQLite. Now what we're going to do is just change this, and we're going to say if debug. So if debug is true, then we're going to use the SQLite database, and we'll say else, then we're going to use the Postgres database. And in here you're going to use the name of your project, which in my case is the blog DB. The username was blog_admin, and the password is testing123, and we can just leave the other two as they are. So basically when we set debug to false, which we will do when we're in production, then it's going to use the database of Postgres. Now before we commit, let's check what else we need to set up. So here they've got the static root, which is just joining it to this path here inside the base directory, but we already have that set up in the project over here. However, I am going to change it to actually be similar to this project. So instead of joining it with the virtual environment path, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to join it with base directory, and we'll just call this static root as it is, and then this will be base directory as well for media root. And let's check what else there is. Now it's just creating a super user, making migrations, so we can go and commit this along. So we'll say Postgres database and static root changes. We'll commit that, and then we'll say git push origin master. There we go. Now we can pull this on the server, and there we go. And now it is making migrations and migrating. Now currently we have debug set to true, which means that it would actually be using the dbSQLite3 file. However, we want to be using Postgres. So to test that, we're going to need to set this to false, and then we will commit this and pull it as well. And there we go. So now it is set to false on the server. And so when we make these migrations, now it's going to be using the Postgres database. So let's actually give ourselves a little bit more space here, and we'll follow the steps. So it says make migrations and migrate. So what I'll do is I'll say Python manage.py and migrate. And okay, so we're getting this operational error where the database blog DB does not exist, and that's most likely because this is actually meant to be all lowercase. So we're going to make that change and then commit it. Okay, so now we've pulled that, and we'll say migrate, and there we go. Those migrations have come through. So now let's look at the next step, and after we migrate, it says create superuser. So we'll do that. Say Python manage.py and create superuser. And here I'm just going to put the username as admin and then fill in all of these details. And there we go. Now we'll come back and it says to collect static. So we'll go here and say manage.py collect static. And it says 530 static files copied to blog/static root. So we'll just list this out. And there you can see the static root folder. And now we're going to allow port 8000 so we can test our project. Now we just add the sudo password. There we go. Come back, and we're going to now run the server on port 8000. So we'll say Python manage.py, and then we just clear that, and we'll say run server. There we go. We can see it's running. And at this point, now you can actually go to the IP address, port 8000. So let's go grab that, paste that there, port 8000. And okay, we're getting a server error. So to debug this stuff, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to comment out the if debug and the else statement. And we're going to make sure that our database here is always being used, so that in this case we can see those errors and use the right database. So we'll commit this and then go and see why that error is taking place, and we'll just set this to true. And now I'll just stop the server and we'll go and pull this again. There we go. Now we can run the server. Let's come back, refresh this, and this is saying that post does not exist, and that's actually because we didn't make the migrations for each app. If we paid attention and just look back at those migrations, then we can see here that there aren't any migrations that have been made for the actual models themselves, or each app rather, because we have marketing and posts, but we're not seeing any migrations for those apps. So let's just come down and we'll say Python manage.py make migrations for marketing and for posts. Now we can see those migrations there, and we'll say migrate. Cool. Now it's said applied those migrations, and we can then go and run the server. Come back, and there we go. Now we can see that it's running. And all our migrations have been made. We don't have any posts yet because it's a new database, but at least we can see that this is now running. And that's actually the whole point here of this, is to see that it is actually running on at least our port 8000. So with that, we can then stop it and we will bind that port to Gunicorn. So let's come back and stop the server. We'll go here and just copy this here and say Gunicorn -- bind to that port 8000, and then this is going to be the project name, which in this case is blog, because blog has the WSGI file in it. And now you can see that it's booted a worker, so we can actually go back and we can go here and test this again, and you see that it still works. But now instead of using the run server command, it's actually just using Gunicorn. So that's pretty cool. So we can stop that, and let's go back here. Now the key thing here is it says the admin interface will not have any of the styling, since Gunicorn does not know about the static CSS content responsible for this. And we're going to use something called Nginx to actually help us with that. So let's go and deactivate the virtual environment. And we'll scroll down, and it's now saying we're going to create a gunicorn systemd service file, which gunicorn is going to use to run our project. So we're going to copy that command there, and it says Nano, which basically means we're going to edit a file inside this folder path, which is called gunicorn.service. And then in here, I'm going to scroll down a bit, and we're just going to copy the final edition of this file. And we can just scroll up, and if we paste it all there, now we need to make sure that the working directory is correct and that the exec start path to our WSGI file is also correct. So let's scroll down, or up rather, and user is Matt, group is still www.data, then working directory is going to be /home, then our username is Matt, and then the project name is going to be blog, so /blog, like that. And then we're going to do the same thing here for exec start, so /blog, and then the environment is env, which is inside the blog folder. Then it's /bin/gunicorn and access log file, 3 workers, bind to, then again the Unix path to home/mat, and then /blog. And this is actually where we want to think a little bit, because the project sock file, this sock file, can actually be overridden if we pull our repository every time we make a change. So this could cause some problems, because then we'd need to create the sock file every single time, and that's not something you want to do. So I'm actually going to put the sock file in a separate folder, and that's just going to be inside mat. So now it's outside the repository, and then every time we pull a new version of the repository, then the sock file is not influenced. So we'll call this blog.sock, and that'll be inside just /mat, so not inside the blog directory. And then the WSGI is inside blog.wsgi and /application, just like that. And everything else should be the same. Now we can just say Control X and Y to save that, and then press enter. There we go. And now we can say sudo systemctl start gunicorn. There we go. And then we say enable, and enable basically makes sure that it starts every time the server is booted. So now you can see that it's created this symlink, that's what it says here, which is going to this file, which is in that path etc systemd, which is the file that we just created. And now we can check if that file actually exists. And now you can see it says active, which is running, which is good. That means that it's actually there. And you can just Control C to exit out of that. And we can go and check for the existence of the file, which we didn't put in the project folder. Remember, we put this just inside /mat. So if we list it out, now you can see blog.sock is there. So we'll just Control L so that we can clear the screen. And we can also see the logs. So we just say sudo journal, and there you can see the logs. Control C to get out of that. And all of this here is just if you have had a problem with the service file. So if you need to basically restart gunicorn, then you need to call the daemon reload command as well. So we don't have any of those problems, so we don't need to worry about that. Now we can just use Nginx to top it all off. So we will copy all the way up to there and then say /blog at the end of that. So this is going to our sites available, and we are creating a new file called blog. And inside there, we're going to copy the last edition of this file, which is over here. And again, we'll paste it all in there. This is basically saying that the server, the IP address itself, is going to listen on port 80, which is a common port to listen for servers. And basically here, the server name is going to be the IP address. So we'll come over here and we will delete this server domain or IP. And we'll then go back here and we'll just copy the IP address, paste it there. the location, and we don't have a fav icon, so we're not too worried about that. Now it's the location of the static directory, which is this location of /static, and this is going to be inside the root directory, and this is inside the directory here, which is /home and then /mat and then blog, which is the project name. So we'll just delete that, and then we can actually do the same thing for our media. So we're going to say location media, and then we'll just put some space here, close that off, and this will also be root home mat blog, just the same as we saw the static. And then location for /, which is basically where our responses are going to be handled. Then this is also got to be the right path, so home mat, and then instead of project, this is blog. And actually it's not, because it's the sock file path that we're referencing, so it's just mat/blog.sock. So Nginx is looking for the sock file from gunicorn to basically handle all our requests. And with that, we can just make sure that we have everything correct. And then we'll just Control X, press Y, and then enter. There we go. Let's go back to the tutorial. And we can then list out everything here. And let's just go back and change this from my project to blog. And basically this command is copying the file from this path into the sites enabled. So it's going from sites available to sites enabled. And now you can test your Nginx. So let's test it out there. It says the syntax is okay and the test is successful, so that's good. And it says if there's no errors, then we can restart Nginx. So we'll copy that, paste that there. There we go. Now we delete the allowed firewall exception for port 8000, and let's execute that. There we go. And now we allow Nginx full, basically meaning Nginx is going to handle everything from now on. And it says we should now be able to go to the IP address, and if we get rid of that, and okay, so we're seeing that none of these static files are coming through, and that means that we need to go and check whether our path in the Nginx file was correct. So let's go actually back to the tutorial just to get the command here to edit our sites enabled file. So let's just go and get that, copy that here, and this is /blog. Okay, and so the reason why it wasn't reading those static files is actually because I had renamed them the wrong folder names. So I had it as static root and media root, and we actually are meant to have it as static and media. So I just changed it to have the correct names, committed it, pushed it to the repository, pulled it here, and then just ran the Nginx command to test it, and then restarted Nginx, and now we have it working. And all the static files are loading, which is good. And we can actually go now and test logging into the admin. So let's log in here. Cool, we can log in. That's really good. And now I'm going to go and create a post. So let's go back here. I'll click on create, and we'll say this is the first post when live, and I'll just fill in the rest here. And there we go. We can see that our post is loading. We've got the media files showing, such as the author's profile picture and the picture for the post itself. So everything seems to be working. All I had to do was just make sure that I had the media directory created inside the repository. So if that's not created already, then Django will say that it has saved the file, but it actually hasn't. You have to make sure that that directory already exists for those files to be saved in that directory. Also, another thing to note is that gunicorn has almost like a lifespan in terms of the settings that it's using. So if you want to make changes to something such as the folder where something is saved, such as the media directory path, then if you change that to your new folder directory path, then if you changed it and you refreshed the page and you added the new images, and it's still giving you an error such as something that the file is not found or the path where that directory doesn't exist, then all you need to do is just restart gunicorn, which you can do with just saying sudo service gunicorn restart, and that will then restart gunicorn itself, but not delete the sock file. So you don't want to delete the sock file, otherwise you've got to go and create that again. So all you're doing is just restarting gunicorn, and then it will then use the latest settings of your project. But normally this only happens if you're making changes once in over long periods of time since the last change that you made. And so other than that, I don't have any other small tips regarding deployment. And so now we've seen how we can deploy Django on DigitalOcean, and the best thing about this is that we're using Postgres, and so we can go and make changes to the code, and every time we deploy a new version of the code, we just make migrations, and our database will be unaffected. We'll still have all of the same content we did before, and that's a really awesome thing and reason why you would not use something like SQLite 3 when you are in production. And so the last thing to do is just to set debug to false, and then just deploy this project so that we don't let our users see the errors coming through, but I'll handle that in a second. And so some things that you can look to learn now are things like adding a domain to the project, adding SSL, and we actually cover that in our Udemy course, which I'll link in the description of this video. And we also show you how you can deploy on other servers such as AWS, Python Anywhere, and Heroku. And so if you've enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below and let us know what you thought. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.